Hey, I'm Veronica Gunn. I'm the Curriculum and Outcome Specialist at the California School for the Blind. And today we are going to go over important reminders and accessibility considerations. Do you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so state testing, woohoo, get excited every year. So important reminders, the grade level is frozen on the day the student logs into the first test. So make sure that that is accurate in TOMS. Processing time for any kind of changes is typically an overnight, but they say 24 to 48 hours. Usually they're ready the next day, no matter what time you do it on the day prior. Student accessibility supports are uploaded and maintained in TOMS. So you want to make sure that you know who your TOMS and your CalPADS people are, because they could be two different people. You want to make sure that you have a current test administrator logon for CAS. And if you are a TVI who serves in multiple districts, you can be listed, you must be listed as a test administrator in each LEA, and you can use the same username and password. So that's super helpful. You don't have to remember a whole bunch of different names. If you administer the CAW, make sure you log into Moodle and do your test examiner tutorial. If you have to do the general session, the ELA and math and the science, it takes about 2 hours. And then make sure that you do your Smarter Balanced training in your district. Do your ELPAC training in your district if you administer the ELPAC. And if you are doing the speaking portion of the ELPAC, then you want to make sure that you are calibrated in Moodle. And that just means that you listen to different responses for each question and make sure that what you would score them is the same way that ELPAC people would score them, so that we're all scoring the students the same way. That's what it means to get calibrated. And then you want to make sure that you know what version of test you're going to administer. Smarter Balance, you don't have to worry about what version, it's all the same version, it's adaptive, so it's going to change depending on how your student answers. But your CAW, ELA and math and science and the ELPAC, they all have different versions depending on what district you're in. So just make sure that you have the correct version assignment. You want to make sure that you do a training test so that you're familiar with the testing system. And then you definitely want to make sure that you do a training test or two with your students so that they're comfortable and they're not learning how to take the test while they're sitting and trying to take the test. You want to make sure that they're comfortable before they have to take the real test. And then you want to make sure that all of your technology works. You don't want to sit down with your student and find out that your computer needs to do a 2-hour update because you haven't done state testing in maybe 3 years, depending on if you came back from remote testing or remote learning. And then you want to make sure that your computer, the test administrator computer and the student computer meets the current tech requirements. And again, you'll have all of the access to the slides, so you'll be able to click this link and it tells you what version of Windows you need and what version of JAWS is acceptable, and every other program that you as a test administrator or the student needs. And then you just want to make sure that everything is working. So your internet connection is working, that your test devices are working. You want to make sure that secure browser is installed. Your headphones work, Braille display works, Embosser. You want to make sure that all of this works before you sit down to take those tests. If you could do it like 2 weeks ahead of time, then that would be great. That gives your IT crew enough time to fix anything that might not be working. Just make sure you give yourself plenty of time. If you're using JAWS, or if your student is using JAWS, you want to make sure that you configure JAWS to recognize the secure browser so that your JAWS is working properly with the secure browser. You want to make sure that your JAWS settings are up to date and they're accurate. So you might need to change a couple of things to make sure that like bold appears on their Braille display, or that it speaks dollars. And each of these things that I'm talking about right now is a link on the screen. So you can be able to click on those and follow the directions. It's step by step what you need to do. And we'll be talking about this more next week. I'll do a demonstration of how to configure JAWS. And then if you're not using the most current version of JAWS, you need to do additional configurations. If you're using JAWS 2019, 2020, or 2021, there was a really bad lag last year. And this file that you need to do to configure, or you need to add to configure JAWS makes it a little bit better. And then we're gonna go ahead and talk about some accessibility resources. So universal tools are available to everyone. You don't need to have a disability to be able to have access to universal tools. Designated supports, it's also available to all, but it needs to be indicated by an educator or a parent or guardian. And that's stuff like color contrast and magnification. And then accommodations are based on your IEP or Section 504 plan for ASL, or if you need a scribe. For Smarter Balanced, the most common accommodations and supports for students using magnification. I listed it on here. So designated support, non-embedded, you want to choose magnification, designated support embedded, permissive mode, which means that when the secure browser is open, you can't have any other program open. It'll come up with an error and it'll say Microsoft Word is open, and it won't let you open the secure browser. So permissive mode allows you to open up JAWS and NVDA, Fusion, Zoom Text, all of those accessibility programs that you might need. So you want to make sure that that is definitely checked. And then streamline. And this one's a little bit tricky for someone who uses magnification. Streamline means that the question will be on top and all of the questions will be below. It's all in one pane. If you do not choose streamline for like your ELA portions, the passage will be on the left side of the screen, and then all the questions will be on the right. So you can be scrolling through the reading section as you can see the questions as well. So maybe you get down to the next question, you're not sure the answer, and then you can scroll on the left side and find the answer like in the passage. So typically it's not streamline, but if your student needs a lot of magnification, like if your student is using, I don't know, 10x, that might mean that there's only a couple words on each side. So they might definitely want to use that streamline so that they have more words in each line. It makes it a little bit easier to read. So that's definitely one that you want to try out with your students ahead of time. And then accommodations non-embedded, print on demand, in case your student experiences eye fatigue and you need to print out a couple, give their eyeballs a rest from the computer screen. There's another couple of reasons we'll talk later about why you might also want print on demand. And then I also, as a disclaimer, I put the accessibility guide link on this slide so that you can look through all of the other accommodations and supports needed, because there might be other ones that your student could benefit from that aren't listed on here. So you definitely want to make sure that your student is getting everything that they need. And then the most common accommodations and supports for a student using a screen reader or Braille. Designated supports non-embedded, scribe items, non-writing, and that's mostly because sometimes JAWS acts a little crazy and maybe you need to click on something for the student. Maybe JAWS won't let them click on C. And so you being able to go over and click it with a mouse. And then read aloud items. Designated supports embedded, permissive mode again, so that they can use JAWS or NVDA, and then streamline, that's the default for someone who reads Braille. Accommodations non-embedded, alternate response options, and that's for someone who needs to use a Braille display. And then read aloud passages if they need the passages read aloud as well, not just the items. And then accommodations embedded would be Braille. something I didn't say is embedded means that it's built into the system, and non-embedded means that it's something outside of the testing, the secure browser. And then again, this doesn't always work for everybody, and there might be other accommodations and supports needed for your students. So make sure you definitely check out that accessibility guide. And then I put it on there again, just to be sure that you know that there's an accessibility guide and to check it out. Some magnification considerations. You want your student to be comfortable on the test. So using magnification software, so your Zoom Text or your Fusion, your Magic, whatever you're using, for customizable settings like your mouse pointer or contrast, you want your student to use something that they're comfortable with and that they've used in the classroom, that they're using on a consistent daily basis. But then use the embedded magnification for increasing and decreasing the size. So if you put your Zoom Text to 1x, you can use the embedded magnification to make it up to like 20x. And the nice thing about the embedded magnification is it all stays on the screen, and we're not going to have to pan off the screen and try to like be able to read all of that. It's all going to stay on the screen no matter how big you get it. So it eliminates all that panning. Some scroll bars stay small, so your students may need help scrolling, and you might want to print these. That's another reason why you want that print on demand option. Sometimes there's tables and they extend further than the screen allows, and the scroll bar stays as small as your normal Firefox scroll bar, and so it's really small. And so you might want to print those out, and you might want to be looking over shoulders to make sure, because they might not see that it goes past the screen and that you actually need to scroll over to be able to see the rest of the table. And then definitely try a practice or training test and get your students comfortable. Screen reader Braille considerations. You must emboss every math question because what's going to appear on the Braille display is going to be the alt text. So if it says 2 + 2 = 4, it's going to be the number 2, the word plus, the number 2, then the equals, and then the number 4. But they wouldn't give you the whole equation. So maybe it says box and it has the word box. So you want to make sure that if they need Nemeth, then they should be able to have access to that. So you want to go ahead and Braille out those BRF and PRN files. You want to consider embossing long passages that you might see on the ELA performance task, because they ask you to go back and cite your sources or compare the different passages. And to be able to do that on a Braille display or even just listening is going to be really tricky, because if they have 3 really long passages and it wants you to go to passage number 2, trying to get back to passage 2 is going to be tricky. But if you have the hard copy Braille there, then that would be great. So they can listen to it, they can read it through on the Braille display, but once they go into writing that long essay, they might want to have that hard copy Braille in front of them to be able to do their essay the best way that they can. You definitely want to work on typing skills on a QWERTY keyboard. Inputting on a Braille display does not always work. In all of my experience, I've never had a student input on a Braille display and make it through the whole test, just inputting on a Braille display. Sometimes it happens on the first question, sometimes it happens on the last question, but at some point it gets wonky or it just stops working altogether. I had a student who wrote a whole entire essay. It showed up on her Braille display. We could pan, we could see it, nothing on the screen. So there's definitely some problems with just inputting on a Braille display. So making sure that you can type. I've never had a problem with just being able to read on a Braille display or navigating on a Braille display, but something about inputting somewhere on the test, it might just go wonky and you want to have like a backup. I've also seen it where a student hasn't pushed any weird buttons or anything, and they're writing a paragraph, and then all of a sudden it starts writing in the middle of the paragraph. So definitely be looking over shoulders if they are inputting on a Braille display. Students are definitely going to need help with spell check. It's accessible, but it's not very usable. It's really tricky. What you're going to have to do is you're going to turn on spell check, and all of the misspelled words are going to turn orange or whatever highlighted color it is. And then you can navigate there. It'll tell you that it's a misspelled word, but then you can't edit it when spell check is on. So you have to go back to the spell check button and turn it off. But then your misspelled words are no longer highlighted. So then you have to navigate and try to find that misspelled word that's no longer highlighted and try to fix it. And then you're going to turn spell check back on to see if you spelled it right that time. So it's really hard, and they're definitely going to need help with that. I feel like I need help, and I have 20/20 vision when I try to do the spell check. So definitely be looking over those shoulders and be ready to jump in if they need help with the spell check. And then again, do a practice or training test. Embossers, again, you need to emboss every single math question. You'll need an embosser that embosses BRF files and PRN files. There'll be a lot of tactile graphics on your math and science. And you want to make sure that they have that under their fingers, like listening to them talk about a graph and not have it underneath your fingers is really hard. The cognitive load of trying to keep all of that information inside your head to get to the question, it's a significant cognitive load. I wouldn't be able to do it. So just make sure that you're embossing all of those questions for your students. I highly recommend a View Plus Max. And in my experience, Firebird crashes when you have a multi-page PRN file. I have known some TVIs out in the field who have used Firebird instead of like Tiger Viewer or Duxbury. And they've been pretty successful. I know that one TVI actually had to come to our campus and emboss a file because that one file for some reason wouldn't open. So if you have a Max, great, use Tiger Viewer. It's the one that I have never had issues with. And then just for you guys, I put in resources again. Smarter Balanced information, ELPAC information, the accessibility guide for like the 5th time, just to make sure you really, really have it. We have CSB Smarter Balance resources. It'll take you to our Google Drive folder. It has a whole bunch of how-tos, how to navigate the test, how to configure JAWS to recognize a secure browser. There's sample PRN files in there, sample BRF files. There's drivers in there. There's all kinds of stuff. All of our presentations for these office hours will be there in there as well. And then you've always got me. You can email me, you can call me. I will always get back to you. And that's it. We can stop recording, and then we can open it up for Q&A.